Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Fellowship in Essential Oils. This week, we're going to dive into an oil which some people love, some people not so much, but I definitely love it. It's fennel. How are you, Liz?
I'm very well, thank you, Adam. And I'm quite excited about talking about fennel. People don't talk about it very often, and I think it's a lovely oil. So it's going to be interesting to hear your thoughts about it too.
Yeah, one thing I find really interesting, it seems to have a really diverse range of uses, but then some people really shy away from using it. So should we dive in and look about how we'd use it for the physical body first of all?
I tell you what, why don't we talk about the reasons why people are nervous about using it first? Because that is
Okay.
makes it easier to understand. Um, just very quickly, yes, it's very good for like water retention, digestive. It's got and urinary. It's got loads and loads of uses right across the board. But if you're somebody like me who has to write contraindications a lot, I go, oh yes, I'd love to write about fennel. It's going to take ages. It's going to take ages to write all the contraindications because there are so many people who have to avoid it.
Hmm.
And so I think there are like a set of people, I guess, who work on the internet who probably just go, God, there's so many different contraindications, and there's so many subtleties to the contraindications. It's almost better to just avoid it. And
Yeah.
so I think and I mean, I don't know if you've seen that, but it's a bit like how it went with eucalyptus oil that everybody suddenly went, we don't use it on children. Well, there are ways to use it on children, but if you working one to one with somebody, that's very different to teaching a whole raft of people all at once, a bit like these videos do. So
So it's a bit, I was going to say, it's a bit of
go on.
throwing the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to fennel. People were just like, oh, well, no one should use it because it's dangerous type of thing. But that's a bit excessive, would you say?
I feel it's excessive, but I can understand why people get there. So I guess the main area to be sort of two main areas that you need to be concerned about, although that kind of ripples out in many different ways. The first is that it is a hormone disruptor, most certainly. So I don't know how up to date my knowledge is, whether we can say that it's like it stimulates estrogen or whether it mimics estrogen. I think probably mimics estrogen is probably the most current knowledge, but I don't think we really know. But whatever happens is the body goes, oh, let's react to estrogen. And because so that has great sort of uses if you're menopausal, for example, because extra estrogen is fantastic. But for if you have endometriosis, not good. That will really be problematic. If you are pregnant, really not good. It's a very strange situation that it improves lactation, so it does, but it is contraindicated in breastfeeding because of this hormone disruption, and also something that happens further down the line with children, which I'll talk about independently. But this estrogen disruption is a big thing. The other thing is, so the chemistry is quite unusual. In fact, I should say that there are two fennel oils. Did you know that?
No, normally it's what is it?
Sweet
Sweet
fennel.
fennel, and I'm trying to remember the Latin name, something vulgar, or say
Yeah,
that vulgara, yeah.
funiculum, funiculum vulgare. But there's also bitter fennel. And there is an
Mm.
essential oil of it, but you don't see that very often. But to be honest, the levels are very similar in them. Um, Transentheone is probably the main constituent in there. It can range from about 50 up to about 90%, depending on the distillation. But also there is estradiol of very, very small amounts, maybe between 2 to maybe 10% at the highest, usually about 7%. Well, estradiol, there are concerns that that may be a carcinogenic constituent. So, for example, if you look at an IFRA report, they will always look at that. So, again, we don't want to be using too much of that. And this carcinogenic effect is interesting because it mimics estrogen, or it stimulates estrogen. I do think mimics. If you have a suspicion that you have cancer, then a lot of cancers are estrogen dependent. So whilst essential oils are wonderful if somebody has cancer and supporting them through the cancer treatment, Fennel is really one that you should stay right away from, because it will feed it's a bit like the rats coming for the bird seed. The more you put out, the more it's going to feed on it. So there's that aspect. But also, if you are somebody like me who has dodgy blood, the transanthiol actually affects how platelets aggregate. So that's an important step in when blood's clotting. So if you are somebody like me who has blood clots, it's helpful because it actually thins the blood. But if you are a haemophiliac, or if you have a platelet clotting disorder, or importantly, if you are taking drugs that will thin the blood, all of those things will be problematic with this constituent. So all of those areas need to be concerned with. Also, it interacts poorly, I think, in the liver with diabetic medications. So again, if somebody's on diabetic medications, problematic. So I also would say don't use on children. So there's this whole range of people that should stay away from it. But actually, so that's a really long list, but actually not that many people. Do you know what I mean? So most of us are okay.
I'm thinking then, to summarize, there's 5 groups there, really. Basically, anyone who's pregnant or got endometriosis.
Yeah.
You've got anyone who's on diabetic medication, anyone who's got any blood thinning issues, and what was the last? Oh, anyone who's got cancer concerns. Yeah. So that's a lot of people, but quite a small percentage of the population, if that makes sense. It does.
I would add something else to that, and that is anyone who is trying to get pregnant. It's a difficult one because, well, so how is your physiology of pregnancy? I will break it down just for those who are not sure. So what happens when the body comes to ovulate is it will release an egg at a time when it's high estrogen. So this is great, high estrogen, that's what we want. A rather unpleasant aspect is the cervix is sealed closed most of the month by a mucus, and that mucus actually softens to allow the sperm to go through the neck of the cervix, and an estrogen makes that happen. So again, we want that. But what happens is the body releases the egg, and then if it's fertilized, or actually if it's fertilized, the egg shell, not that there is a shell, but the egg shell breaks down and becomes what's called the corpus luteum. And that is the ovaries secrete progesterone, but the corpus luteum also produces progesterone. And you need that luteal phase to be long enough for the body to actually maintain a pregnancy. So whilst that we're using we want the estrogen to be high for those parts of ovulation and for the cervix to open properly, but immediately we need the progesterone to go up, and pregnancy can't be supported unless there is a progesterone dominant environment. So we don't want Fennel in the system then, because it's going to be fighting and making estrogen. So again, somebody who is trying to get pregnant, I would say, if you are thinking of using essential oils to bring your hormone system into alignment, do that, but physically, like, make a plan not to be trying in that 6 months. Use your essential oils to tone the the uterus to get your hormones into line, and in that case fennel's fantastic. But the second you start trying, we're going, right, I'm putting that fennel bottle away. So again, to stress it, it's not a hazardous oil. It isn't. You would use it in quite low dilutions, maybe 2.5–3%. You certainly should not be ingesting this oil. So even as somebody, this is, if you look in Tisserand and Young, it's very stipulated, do not ingest this one, because there are issues with the estradiol in particular, but so many issues. So whilst it isn't a hazardous oil used topically, it's definitely a hazardous oil to ingest. So I can understand why some people say, no, you should never use this oil, but that's being overly cautious.
Well, sounding rather confident or selfish, none of the things that you've listed apply to me. And I'm sure there are many people that are listening at the moment that don't tick any of those boxes either. So how are we going to use it?
So I would say there's sort of 4 main areas that it falls into. So like most herbs, of course, digestive. So it is tremendous for any kind of slow digestion. And bear in mind, remember that I said about how it interacts with diabetes meds. So this is kind of the area where you would have to be like quite careful that you're not wandering over, because diabetes and digestion is definitely a thing. But indigestion or slow digestion or constipation, all of those things, I don't know if anybody doesn't know, it comes from the fennel seed, and it's got that very aniseed-y kind of feel to it, which is the anthiol. And any kind of aniseed-y smell, you can always go, yeah, that's going to be great for speeding up digestion. So that would be the first one. The next one I would say would be for water. Absolutely fantastic support for the lymphatic system. So any kind of situation where the body is holding water or holding on to water, then this is great. So I would say PMT, when you like swollen boobs and you're retaining water, then fantastic. If you have hurt yourself, you banged your knee and it swells up, amazing. Swollen ankles, again, swollen ankles and pregnancy, definitely a thing, but we're not using it with pregnancy. But any kind of situation I'm going to say in this heat, we had a whole day of summer yesterday, and when you're hot, you kind of balloon a bit, don't you? It's really, really refreshing. So it's tremendous in like foot baths and that kind of thing to get the swelling down in your feet and stuff like that. Puffy eyes, any kind of fluid retention anywhere, amazing. Particularly actually cellulite. Anywhere where you want the lymphatic system to get faster, particularly with juniper, cypress, absolutely fantastic. So just in case anybody doesn't know why that would work, so the lymphatic system is kind of runs alongside the circulatory system or the circulatory system. But the blood has a pump to move it. So that would be the heart. And so that kind of always is pushing blood around the system. But the lymphatic system relies upon muscle tone. So if you're somebody who's got tremendous muscles, and it's very unlikely that you're going to have fluid retention, but if you've got quite a sedentary job, you're having a time that you're quite sluggish, and your muscles are more, for want of a better word, flaccid, they haven't got that sort of tension to them, then there are chances that you are going to need extra help occasionally in the lymphatic system. And we make it, that sounds a bit like it's always cosmetic, but the lymphatic system has more uses than just moving fluid. It supports our whole immune system. So, for example, if somebody has an infection in the body that won't move, dealing with the lymphatic system can be a great way to boost their immune system. You're not supposed to use the word boost, but actually to shift, let's move the germs out and get the immune system working. So any of those kind of systems. But as I say, particularly with cellulite, where the thighs really hold, great. And lymphatic drainage massage is a great way to deal with it. But I would always say fennel, juniper, cypress, absolutely fantastic mix. And there were a lot of aromatherapists use it for respiratory issues, because fenchone, I always go to say frenchone, fenchone is a ketone, and ketones break down stuff. So when we're talking about gunk on the chest and things like that, it's quite low concentration, but enough to be effective. Fenchone also comes with its own issues or concerns, or actually it doesn't, but I'll explain why I said that. Anything that's a ketone can be neurotoxic. So problems with epilepsy, problems with psychosis, delusions, that kind of thing. But fenchone is not actually connected with those concerns. So somebody who's looked at the chemistry and gone, oh, ketones, we're going to have all of those concerns, might actually put it in that of more reasons not to use it. But actually, fenchone doesn't have those concerns attached to it. So yeah, and funnily enough, I'd said to Mum, we're going to do fennel, and she said, oh, how interesting! I haven't thought about that all for ages. I used to have really good effects with using it for greasy panels with celery seed oil, and I was like, whoa, that was just, I never even thought of doing that, but it is astringent. So yeah, greasy skin would be an excellent way of doing that. Also, there are see that was the kind of the fennel look then, because I had to think, well, is that a thing or is that a thing? So very good for stimulating appetite, right? So one of the key areas where somebody might need to have their appetite stimulated is if they're having chemotherapy or if they're having radiotherapy. So you would say, well, fennel would be really good, but no, because of the estrogenic thing, we don't want to go down the fennel route. You see how you kind of have to do this double back on yourself all of the time. But yes. So let me have a look what else I've got in here. Incidentally, if you're not sure, don't forget that my book is free to download on any of the ebook platforms, and it's written that out under here. So I've put hiccups, colic, diuretic. So yeah, I should have said that, shouldn't I? So this movement of fluid also going to make you go to the toilet more. That's the whole point. Pulmonary disease. Intestinal parasites. Now, I can't actually remember what the science is there for that, but I wouldn't have written it. But I would imagine that comes from herbalism. But yeah, if somebody's got like tapeworm or something like that, there are other oils that you could look at, but that would be one I would certainly think about using. So those would be the main areas.
Now, I don't often find myself saying this, but I want to talk a little bit more about boobs. You mentioned that it's good if boobs are swelling at certain times of the month. I have known many people that have had success with, if they want to reduce their milk supply, peppermint normally can do that. But you did kind of in passing say that fennel has a amplificatory effect on increasing milk supply, correct?
Yes, but so I'm glad that you went back on there because I would have forgotten. So you'll have to forgive my vague recollection of this, but fenchone, I'm pretty sure, was the constituent. Little girls who had been exposed to fenchone developed their own boobs. So this is one of the reasons why we don't go down the thing with children, because I don't know what I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, their breasts started to fill out even though they were only like sort of 5. once the fenchone had gone out the system, then that dropped off. And also, again, can't remember the constituent. I do think maybe fenchone, but I might be wrong. When one of the things I often have comments on when somebody is rude enough to leave me a negative review on my books, often they'll say, there's no proof that essential oils are not safe in pregnancy. And absolutely, you are correct, and that's the point. Because ethically, it is unsound to test on an unborn child. So therefore, we don't have the data available to us. So that is why we take a cautious approach. However, what happens sometimes is there are experiments on rat embryos, rat feti, what is the plural, I don't know, cells in petri dishes. And so this gives us some guidance as to what would happen. So whilst people and rats are not equal, although I've met a few that are, we do have similar evolutionary processes for mammalian cells. So when, I'm sure it was fenchone, but it might have been transcendental, was put directly onto rodent embryo cells, it killed them. And so, but also as they got older, if I remember right, it affected fetal development. So this is one of the reasons why we say we don't breastfeed on it, because we know that the oils pass through the breast milk.
Yeah. Fenchone, is it only found in fennel, or would you find it elsewhere as well?
Oh, why do you always ask me these questions? You know I'm rubbish at chemistry. No, I think it's in other ones as well, but I couldn't tell you what they are off the top of my head. If you did want to look where I would look, had Adam given me the heads up that he was going to do that, Jennifer Peace Ryan's book of essential oils is a fantastic place to look for that. She usually does things by constituents, and also Tisserand's book. But no flagging up, no research done.
Not a problem. One last question about boobs. So if someone is wanting to increase their milk supply, what would you as an aromatherapist be recommending?
Drinking loads of water.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe celery seed, maybe clary sage, but I would always want to go and check my safety before I recommended that. But I would have thought those two. But drinking tons of water would be my recommendation.
Fair enough. Now, the final thing that I've seen looking at fennel and its physical uses, I find it appearing in a lot of blends for cramping. Now, this can be menstrual, this can be digestive, and this can be muscular. What's the idea behind that?
Antispasmodic.
Yeah.
So one of the indications I got in the book is colic. And the reason why I said that is because for the most part you would not want to give a child it for colic, but actually horses and colic is a thing, and adults get colic, or not very often, but this kind of cramping and griping, fennel is good. And I'm going to say but I'd go Roman chamomile or clary sage myself by preference over it.
Got you. Now, we've talked a lot, obviously, about the physical, but we love to talk about the holistic. Would you ever reach for fennel for an emotional or even a spiritual aspect?
Definitely. Actually, so do you want to hear a weird story that's related but not related? Because I have many.
Yeah, let's fire away.
So I always say that when you breathe fennel, it's a bit like you've run a marathon and you're at the 25th mile and you're hitting the wall and you just feel like you're not going to get back through it. And so this doesn't have to be physical. I remember when I was doing the be on the Essential Oil Recipe Summit, and I was just like, I just can't do any more. I'm so tired. And Fennel is really good for pushing you through that. And so I've said that for years and years and years. That's always been the main thing. It's very uplifting. It's very resilient. It makes you feel like you can overcome anything. But what I found was extraordinary was I've always used that example. And Fennel, a marathon means city of Fennel.
Wow.
I know. So I was like, wait, what? What? So now we're going off Fennel, right? But let me tell you another story because it's so delightful. You're just going to love this story. It's got nothing to do with Fennel. Absolutely. But still. So do you know where the race of the marathon comes from?
I have no idea.
Okay. So the race of marathon comes from ancient Greece, but not the Olympic Games. It was never in the Olympic Games. In actual fact, it was somebody's job. So the hemerodromos was the sacred messenger that took information from one place to another and delivered messages, a kind of like a carrier pigeon on the foot, right? And so when the Battle of Marathon was won, when the Athenians beat the Darius the First, the barbarians, the Hemodromos called Pheidippides ran all the way from Marathon back to Athens to deliver the news that he'd been beaten and that the Athenians were the winners. And so he ran that 25 miles. Actually, the marathon is 26 miles, but that's where it comes from. So, but there's so much more. So everybody, that gets said a lot, that story. So that's not an unusual story. But when I've been researching the nymphs, the cult of the nymphs in Athens was actually established after the Battle of Marathon, thanks to the message that came with that. We've beaten by Pheidippides. So I was like, I need to learn more than that. When I read it, I was like, oh my God, why does people not tell this story? So like I say, it's not related to Fennel, but it's so great, I've got to tell it you. So what happened was Darius the First had decided, he was the Persian ruler, and he wanted to take vengeance on the Athenians because they'd waded in with the Ionians and they'd defeated him. They'd gone to the satrapy of Sardis and set it on fire and raised it to the floor, and he was like, right, revenge. So he did this vow. He raised his bow to the heavens, and Zeus, I will have revenge upon the Athenians. And he said to his manservants, you must tell me thrice a day before meals, master, remember the Athenians, so that he never lost his vengeance against them. Well, the Athenians were like, whoa, this is bad, because Darius I, he had like the worst army. Had left atrocities in their wake. So they decided, right, well, we're going to have to defend ourselves. So how are we going to do that? We need to send word to all of the Greeks. Well, Pheidippides, who we spoke about, who sent the message back, Pheidippides was actually sent to recruit the Spartans. So the Hemodromos runs and runs and runs, and his job is to run all the way through the day, the night, without stopping. And he does that to Sparta, which is 136 miles. And Pausanias says he does it in 2 days. So he runs all the way there, and he speaks to the Spartan king and said, will you, surely you will not desert the Athenians in their hour of need, or something like that. And he's very convincing, and the Spartans say, yeah, I think we should help. Only, unfortunately, you've come in the middle of the Kolkia, which is the festival to Apollo, not allowed to fight until the moon gets full. And so Phytippides looks and goes, oh, 6 days? 6 days? That's too long. He's going to come before that time. So he has something to eat, has a little nap, and then runs all the way back to Athens, another 136 miles. On the way, he meets the god Pan, who says, I will support you, but only if you set up a cult of the nymphs, a cult for me in Athens. That's where I come in. And so he goes, okay, because, I've got to get back. Sorry, Pan. Darius is coming. It's terrifying. Got to run. So he runs all the way back to Athens. So he does the other 136 miles. And when he gets there, other hamadromos have managed to actually recruit 10 different polises, so city-states. And they're in a divide because each city-state has their own general, and they've said, right, each general will lead us for a day, but 5 are saying we should go now, we should take them, we should take the offensive, and the other 5 are going, no, we need to wait, we need to see what's going on. So Phytippides comes and goes, you know what, it's no good waiting, it's good waiting for the Spartans, they're not going to be here in time. And at that time, a message comes and says that Darius's men have landed at Marathon. So they go, well, that's it then. So they head over to Marathon, but they hide, and there's this famous standoff. And this is legend, not myth. So this is history. So they have this standoff for 5 days, and they can see Darius's men come, and they are outnumbered, like by thousands. And they stay in the woods. And of course, Pan is the god of the woods, isn't he? And the Ionians, so one of the city-states, Ionians climb up in the trees, and they're watching in the distance, and they can see all this. They've got this amazing cavalry. They're all armored differently to them. They've got weaponry like you've never seen, and it's terrifying. But then the Ionians go, what's going on? They're leaving. And we don't know why the Persians were leaving. Potentially they were going to attack Athens while nobody was there. Perhaps for whatever reason, the Persians started to leave. So the general in charge put the 10 states in a line, and he put 8 deep, but only 4 deep in the 2 middle city states. So the Persians came at those 4 deep here, and they went round them like that, enveloped them. And because the Greeks had got like armor and weapons, and the Persians had got like catapults and stuff like that. Catapults are no good when you're just wrapped around by people, and there was this massive slaughter. And so then they ran after the Persians that were going to their boats. And that day, the Persians lost 6,500 men, and the Greeks lost 169, including the man that had said, right, he'd made the deciding decision to move forward. So then Phytippides, of course, then has to take the message back. So there's the famous bit. I can't believe this is the famous bit, that he runs back. And when he gets there, he says, we also owe to the god Pan. I need to set up this cult to Pan. And then he dies. So we all hear about Phytippides dying, like running the 25, but actually he ran nearly 300 miles in less than a week, if the story is true.
Wow, that is a big story. And I just have one question about it. Would Phytippides have benefited from a massage with Fennel for the cramping of his muscles from all that running?
Well, there's a good question. Potentially, yes, but also remember, Marathon means city of Fennel.
Fennel, yeah.
So what was and giant fennel, right? So we think that it was probably a fennel called Siphion. I think I've said that right. And that was abortifacient. So people would go there for their illegal abortions. So also, see, right, we got this like picture of the field, but potentially there was fennel all round because that's what it was called, City of Fennel.
Now, historically as well, I've also found a lot of writing about fennel being used in rites of passage or initiation rites. And it almost as though if you had to pair it with an animal, it's not normally the animal I initially paired it with, but it'd be like the snake. and it's used anywhere where there is a need for you to shed old skins or old ways of being or old belief patterns in order to evolve and move forward. And it's even been used in wedding rites as this idea that Fennel will allow a couple to be ongoingly successful, because as you go through the years of a marriage, there is this constant need to shed and evolve, shed and evolve, shed and evolve, and grow together. So Fennel has this really kind of transformative power as well, that I've found it can be used for any time that you just need to. It's almost like a phoenix rising out of the ashes kind of oil as well.
Well, I mean, that's not that dissimilar to the imagery I was saying, was it? That you've done this huge thing and you've just got to get through that last bit, and that last bit is the death, isn't it? You know, yeah. You die and then you rise again in that. It's almost like somebody's final surge before they die. They have this, suddenly this energy comes from nowhere. And I didn't know that about I didn't know that about the initiation rites, but that seems exactly correct to me.
Yeah. The other reason I really love Fennel, and this is where I use it for kind of the metaphysical aspects of it, is the key word that comes to mind for Fennel is choice. Now, obviously, as you said before, it's great for digestion. It can be used for cramping. And I want us all to think about a time in our lives when we've been almost like cramped or doubled over because of a decision. We feel powerless. And I find Fennel's really good for people that are in a powerless state. Because what it does is sometimes we have control over a situation, sometimes we do not. But Fennel teaches us that we always have a choice on how we react to that situation. And thus it brings the power back to us. And I find when we look at our astrology and we kind of pair it with, I don't tend to pair it with one of the key astrological bodies, but more of these divine feminine energies like Lilith or even Eris, somewhere where the woman is taking back power that's been removed from her. So I think anytime someone is finding life hard to digest, reach for Fennel. And although some people may go, oh, well, probably it would be a solar plexus oil then, wouldn't it? Because it's linked to the digestive system. For some reason, for me, the anise oils, whether it be Fennel, whether it be star anise, whether it be anise myrtle, these ones seem to kind of always work really well on the third eye chakra. And I think what Fennel allows us to do is to almost keep shedding the thoughts of negativity or that we're stuck or that we're powerless in a situation. Go, no, hold on. I can choose how I react to this. I'm not going to choose to allow this situation to disempower me. I'm going to make the choice that empowers me, and that will allow me to digest not only my food, but digest life in a much more empowered way.
I think that's very clever. I would say solar plexus. Do you know what insects like Fennel?
No, I do not.
So if you have a plant in your garden, there is no mistaking what insects like it, because it gets covered in wasps, and a particular one called a fennel wasp. And so this idea of mean you know, that can be a Fennel thing of like vengeance or just spitefulness, you know, just if somebody crosses you, or like you were saying about women's rights, and sometimes, I mean, we talk about them very lackadaisically, but women's beliefs are so outnumbered by men's beliefs. Sometimes you do have to be so bloody minded to stand up against it, and it is wearing. And that whole thing of the marathon thing, you know, just I've been doing this and doing this and doing this, I can't do it anymore. Fennel goes, you can, and here's the spark to be really mean if you want to. You know, so you will stand up and say, no, excuse me, please, what do you think you're doing? You know, get out of my space, give me that raise. You know, he's on more money than I am. All of those things where you suddenly have to go, no, enough, I have rights too. one of those are fennel things. As the wasp would do it, that like people are scared of wasps. People are scared of bees, which is obviously miraculous to me, but people are really scared of wasps. And so if you can embody that wasp energy, amazing how, and I mean that in not like the American socialite wasp, I mean like the get out of my way kind of thing. That is fennel energy. Yeah.
It's really interesting. On the day that we're recording this, and we're going to release it today as well, there's actually an astrological event happening. Eris is going into retrograde. Now, Eris is in the running to be the 10th planet. She's slightly smaller but heavier than Pluto and out in those far reaches. And her mythology is very much around, she's known as the goddess of strife and discord. She's caused a few rifts in mythology when she threw a golden apple on the table in front of all the goddesses that said "to the most beautiful." And she's also attributed to studying the Trojan War. Now, even if you're not into Greek mythology, if you like a bit of Disney, if you've seen the movie Maleficent, Eris and Maleficent are very, very similar. They kind of govern or talk about this feeling of being wanting to be vengeful or causing strife because you feel uninvited, excluded, or that someone else is being given the attention that you deserve in that type of way. And so when Eris goes in retrograde, it often brings up feelings of like, I'm being left out, this is not fair. And we've got to decide, do we go down that empowered of like standing up and fighting for what we believe in, but also becoming a possible outcast from that? Or do we just keep our mouth shut in order to keep the peace? And for all of us, we need to find a balancing act of what battles are worth fighting and which are not worth causing the trouble for. So fennel, I think, would be an amazing oil to lean into as we try and balance these two aspects within ourselves that will be coming up around this time because Eris is going retrograde today.
I think that's absolutely true. And also kind of remember how the Athenians were so outnumbered, but still something came out of nowhere, pulled something out the hat, whether it be, well, maybe it was the wasps, maybe that's why they disappeared, maybe there were wasps everywhere, I don't know. But, that something in the universe just goes, yeah, it's your turn. And just rather than just going, I can't bother, I've had enough now. Fennel goes, no, come on, we can do this.
And even interesting when we think about, we started talking about, we've got to be wary of fennel of this, we've got to be wary of fennel of this, which of course we do, but it's almost a feared oil, but also a very powerful oil, physically, but also metaphysically. In that, in the way we've been talking about this kind of revenge energy or this fighting for what you believe in, we'd all almost think of fighting as a negative thing. But if we don't fight, sometimes we get taken advantage of. So fennel almost has this kind of power to it, doesn't it?
Yep, the battle warrior. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So we've talked about it being, I still kind of, I would say, yes, it would work for the solar plexus chakra, but I keep on leaning towards the third eye chakra. You said the solar plexus. I've either said Eris or even Lilith for asteroids or dwarf planets astrological wise. What would you say, Fennel, astrologically?
So I think that in terms of the physical body, we have to say Jupiter. That yellow expansiveness is liver, but also that idea that one can push further, that can reach further. That's Jupiterian. And also the fact that it's totally irrelevant, but that Darius shouted, "I will have revenge on the Athenian Zeus," and for whatever reason, Zeus went, "Do you think so?" And he organised the universe to go, "I don't think so." So we have to have Jupiter.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can understand that for sure. So fennel, how would you summarize fennel in a few sentences? I would say probably that it is a potent oil that needs to be respected and considered before we use it, but can also be used, especially on a holistic level, for great manifestations and great empowering, and to bring you from a state of disempowerment to being authentically fighting for what you believe in. How about yourself?
But actually, I think that its greatest uses are in the physical body. that for digestion, particularly for fluid, this diuretic aspect, and just moving toxicity generally, it's a tremendous detoxifying oil. You usually ask lately, is it one that you should have in your box? And I would say, I think it's a bit like when you've got a teenager and eventually you have to say, you've got to go on the train on your own. It's about learning to be a bit grown up with your essential oils, really. There are so many things that you've got to think of. It's a complex one, because you have to, every time you come up against something, you have to think, well, action, contraindication, backwards and forwards. But it is like going to university, really, using fennel oil.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining us on Fellowship in Essential Oils. Remember, we'll be back next week when we're going to dive into another amazing gift of Mother Nature. Until then, take care and have a sniff of your fennel and see what you think, and let us know in the comments below.
Bye-bye.